You'll never make it on your own. Jack Thompson's voice cut through the quiet morning air, sharp and patronizing. But Emily Harper didn't flinch. She stood in the narrow doorway of her favorite cafe, the faint scent of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon pastries surrounding her, a small, grounding reminder that the world outside Jack's opinions still existed. Her hand tightened around the handle of her tote, the leather worn soft from years of use, and she felt the familiar tug of memories she had buried deep, the lavish penthouse, the endless dinners where she had smiled through the tension, the nights she had lain awake listening to Jack's practiced laughter echo through their shared space, believing in his every word until the foundations of her life crumbled beneath her. The winter sunlight filtered through the cafe windows, casting golden rectangles on the worn wooden floorboards, illuminating the dust motes that floated lazily in the air like tiny stars suspended in a private galaxy. And Emily's gaze swept across them with a quiet determination, remembering the lessons of solitude, resilience, and the small triumphs she had accumulated like secret jewels over the past 5 years. She remembered the late nights in her modest apartment, poring over architectural sketches and spreadsheets, the gentle hum of her laptop filling the room with a promise of something more, and the way her heartbeat had quickened with each small victory, a whisper that her life was still hers to shape. She remembered the first time she met Adam Sullivan, the quiet billionaire with a calm presence that contrasted Jack's thunderous ego, the way he had spoken with respect and curiosity, never pity, never condescension, and how that encounter had ignited a flicker of hope she thought had long been extinguished. As she stepped toward the counter, her heels clicking softly against the polished concrete, the distant roar of a private jet landing at the nearby airstrip made her pause, a thrill of anticipation mingling with a deep, grounded confidence that came from knowing she had built herself back up piece by piece, without apologies, without compromise. She imagined Jack seeing her now, unaware of the full extent of her transformation, the power she had quietly cultivated, the independence she had claimed through sweat, perseverance, and unwavering dignity, and she allowed herself a faint, knowing smile, the kind that carried both patience and inevitability. The aroma of fresh espresso and the faint warmth of the morning sun on her shoulders reminded her that she had survived, and more than that, she had thrived, a subtle but undeniable force that would soon become impossible to ignore. And as the cafe door swung open to let in a rush of crisp winter air, Emily Harper's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph, a single thought echoing in her mind and ready to be revealed to the world. He had no idea. Emily Harper stepped out of the cafe into the crisp morning air, the faint scent of roasted coffee beans still lingering on her coat, and she took a deep breath, letting the cool wind fill her lungs with clarity and purpose. Her mind replayed the months of careful planning, the meticulous rebuilding of her life from the fragments Jack Thompson had left behind. Each contract she had signed, each client she had met, each project she had completed with her design consultancy had been a quiet assertion of independence, a reclaiming of the autonomy that had once been stripped from her. The city streets stretched out before her, lined with historic brick buildings and the soft golden light of winter morning reflecting off the windows, and she felt a pulse of anticipation and control, the kind that comes only from hard-won resilience. Emily thought of Adam Sullivan, the steady presence who had entered her life not with grandiose promises, but with respect and an unwavering belief in her abilities. He had offered guidance without dominance, encouragement without expectation, and his subtle support had allowed her to step fully into the person she had always been beneath Jack's shadow. As she walked toward her office, the click of her heels against the polished pavement measured her resolve, each step echoing with the rhythm of independence and quiet triumph. The hum of the city around her seemed to sync with her heartbeat, a symphony of ordinary life carrying extraordinary potential. She remembered the first day she had signed the lease for her office space, a small loft overlooking the river, with sunlight streaming in across wooden floors, filling the room with warmth and promise. That day had felt like planting a flag in the soil of her own future, a declaration that she would no longer exist in the margins of someone else's narrative. Emily ran her fingers across the smooth surface of her desk, polished and gleaming, a symbol of her work ethic and vision, and she could almost hear the faint whisper of triumph in the quiet spaces between her thoughts. She reflected on the design projects she had undertaken, each one an opportunity to express creativity and command respect on her own terms, crafting spaces that spoke of personality and story rather than ostentation and pretense. And in each success, she had felt the steady accumulation of self-assurance, a growing fortress against the doubts planted by past betrayals. Even as she navigated the bustle of the city, greeting colleagues and clients with warmth and confidence, there was an undercurrent of anticipation, a sense that today would mark the intersection of her hard-won power and the world she had once fled from. Her gaze briefly lifted to the horizon, where the distant roar of a jet engine reminded her of the scale of her journey, the heights she had quietly attained while Jack remained ensnared in his own assumptions and limited vision. Emily felt a thrill of satisfaction at the thought of him underestimating her still, unaware of the magnitude of her growth, the wealth of experience, and the quiet influence she now wielded. She straightened her posture, shoulders back, chin lifted, the sunlight catching her hair in glimmers of auburn and gold, and walked forward with the calm certainty of someone who knew her own worth, the city and its possibilities stretching endlessly ahead, each moment a testament to her resilience, each interaction a quiet assertion of authority. And as she reached the glass doors of her office building, the reflection staring back at her was no longer the woman defined by loss and humiliation, but a figure of control, composure, and latent power, prepared for whatever the day and the world might challenge her with. Emily Harper stepped onto the tarmac, the soft hum of the private jet engines vibrating through the soles of her heels, and she allowed herself a small, controlled smile, the kind that held every ounce of the resilience and determination she had accumulated over the past years. The winter sunlight reflected off the polished fuselage, throwing scattered light across the runway, and she lifted her chin with quiet authority, her emerald coat catching the gleam, her presence commanding attention without a word. Passengers and staff alike paused, their eyes drawn to the confident stride of a woman who had rebuilt everything, her posture impeccable, each movement deliberate, an embodiment of poise and self-assurance. Emily's gaze flicked toward the city skyline in the distance, the familiar streets she had walked countless times as a quieter, smaller version of herself, and she felt a surge of triumph, a private acknowledgement of the journey from shadows to strength. She had navigated the labyrinth of financial setbacks, social judgment, and emotional fatigue, transforming each obstacle into a stepping stone toward the life she now commanded. As she approached the jet's entrance, her reflection in the glass doors showed a woman composed, radiant, and wholly in control, far removed from the uncertainty and vulnerability Jack Thompson had once assumed defined her existence. The sound of her own heartbeat was steady, a rhythm of confidence that matched the gentle roar of the engines, and she imagined Jack witnessing this moment from afar, his assumptions crumbling under the reality of her success and independence. Each step up the portable staircase was a measured assertion, the tactile sensation of brushed metal beneath her fingers grounding her in the present, while her mind cataloged the weight of accomplishment she carried invisibly, quietly asserting that she was no longer subject to anyone else's judgment. Inside the cabin, the faint scent of polished leather and subtle citrus greeted her, a sophisticated yet understated reminder of the life she had meticulously reconstructed, and she allowed herself a brief pause to admire the sun glinting across the plush interior, a reflection of the elegance, precision, and quiet power she had cultivated. The thought of Adam Sullivan, who had remained a steady presence without overshadowing her, brought a soft sense of gratitude and a reaffirmation that her triumph was not just material, but deeply personal, a testament to her intellect, patience, and unwavering resolve. As the door closed behind her, Emily leaned briefly against the cabin wall, absorbing the quiet authority of the moment, and she knew that every challenge, every slight, every whispered doubt from the past had forged a woman who could move through the world with calm assurance and undeniable presence, a figure who no longer required permission to exist fully. Outside, the engine's vibration resonated through the tarmac, a subtle drumbeat marking the intersection of her past and present, and Emily Harper allowed herself a final, knowing glance toward the horizon, each mile Of runway, a silent announcement of arrival. Every heartbeat a quiet, immutable declaration that she had claimed her space, her power, and her story entirely on her own. Emily Harper walked down the jetway into the bustling terminal, the sound of her heels echoing against the polished marble floors, each step deliberate, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had meticulously reconstructed her life. The bright winter sunlight filtered through the large glass windows, scattering across the gleaming surfaces and highlighting the sharp lines of her tailored emerald coat, and she felt the subtle thrill of anticipation as she approached the waiting area where the city and its familiar chaos awaited her. Every detail, from the leather of her briefcase to the soft hum of the air conditioning above, contributed to a sense of grounded presence, a contrast to the chaotic memories of the past she had gradually transformed into a reservoir of strength. She moved through the crowd with measured grace, exchanging polite nods with the staff, each interaction a demonstration of composure and poise that spoke louder than any words could convey. Her mind traced the path from the countless early mornings, hours spent preparing presentations, late nights drafting proposals, and strategic meetings that had slowly built her independence, each challenge a step toward reclaiming control over a life that had once seemed impossible to navigate alone. Emily caught sight of a familiar figure across the terminal, someone she recognized from prior encounters, yet their attention was momentarily drawn away by the presence she now exuded, a quiet magnetism rooted in authenticity and careful mastery of her own domain. The roar of arriving planes punctuated the background, a steady rhythm that mirrored the determination coursing through her veins, and as she reached the automatic sliding doors, the warm winter sun casting long, confident shadows behind her, she paused to survey the scene, noting the movement of the people, the brief glimpses of hurried travelers and distant taxicabs, each detail grounding her further in the present. She allowed herself a brief smile at the realization that the careful cultivation of skill, patience, and unwavering focus had placed her in a position where presence alone commanded acknowledgement, a power born of quiet, deliberate effort rather than ostentation or drama. As she continued through the terminal, the weight of her tote against her shoulder served as a subtle reminder of independence, of the responsibilities she had chosen to embrace for herself, and the anticipation of what lay ahead only strengthened her resolve. Emily's eyes met the reflective surfaces of the terminal, catching glimpses of herself that reminded her of the long journey from vulnerability to authority, from dependence to autonomy. And in that reflection, she saw not only the woman who had endured, but the woman fully in command of her life, every movement, every decision, and every interaction a testament to resilience, strategy, and measured grace. The terminal's hum, the distant intercom announcements, and the faint scent of coffee from nearby kiosks blended into a backdrop of controlled chaos that she navigated effortlessly, each step forward a quiet declaration of purpose and capability, the culmination of years spent transforming loss into knowledge, doubt into determination, and uncertainty into a deliberate, unstoppable force ready to engage with the world on her own exacting terms. Emily Harper entered the lobby of the grand event space, the polished marble floors reflecting the morning sun, and she felt the weight of years of perseverance settle into a quiet confidence that radiated from every movement. The towering glass windows framed the city skyline beyond, the winter light casting intricate shadows across the geometric patterns of the floor, and she walked with deliberate poise, each step echoing softly, announcing her presence without a word. Her tailored emerald coat shimmered subtly under the ambient light, the fabric catching the gleam in a way that emphasized her stature and the meticulous care with which she had rebuilt her life. Emily's mind traced the steps of her transformation, from the small victories in her modest office to the strategic alliances she had cultivated with clients and mentors who recognized her talent and integrity. She allowed herself a brief, private smile at the memory of her first successful contract after Jack's dismissal, a moment that had felt like reclaiming a piece of herself with every signature she had penned. As she moved past the reception desk, her eyes scanned the gathering crowd, noting the muted hum of conversation, the distant laughter, the soft clinking of glass, and she imagined the familiar faces of those who had once doubted her, all now witnessing her ascent without ever having known the full scope of her capabilities. Every glance she exchanged, every polite nod, carried a subtle assertion of control, a silent message that she belonged in these spaces on her own terms, that her worth was no longer defined by anyone else's perception. She reflected on Adam Sullivan's quiet support, the steady presence that had encouraged rather than overshadowed, and felt a surge of gratitude intertwined with pride, knowing that the growth she had achieved was entirely her own. The ambient scent of polished wood, subtle florals, and leather from the seating areas mingled with the faint aroma of coffee from nearby kiosks, creating a sensory landscape that grounded her in the reality of her achievements while heightening the anticipation of the encounters to come. Emily paused briefly at the central staircase, the light streaming through the large windows illuminating her features with clarity and purpose, and she allowed herself a single, deep breath, a preparation for the precise, composed interactions that awaited her. Each careful movement, each confident gesture, reinforced the narrative of transformation she had painstakingly constructed, a testament to resilience, strategy, and unwavering determination. She felt the subtle thrill of anticipation as she imagined the unfolding of the day, the convergence of past and present, the silent acknowledgement of her independence and strength. And in that moment, Emily Harper embodied the culmination of years of thoughtful effort, poised to navigate the world with authority, grace, and the quiet assurance that every step forward was a declaration of her reclaimed power and self-determination. Emily Harper paused at the threshold of the grand hall, the soft murmur of voices and distant clinking of glass filling the air, a backdrop to the subtle electricity that thrummed beneath the surface. The sunlight pouring through the towering windows cast intricate patterns across the polished marble floors, catching the emerald shimmer of her coat and reflecting in the polished shoes of passing guests. She moved forward with deliberate composure, each step measured, a quiet assertion of authority and self-possession that contrasted sharply with the fleeting glances of curiosity and admiration from those around her. Her mind cataloged every detail of the space, the subtle scent of fresh flowers mingling with the faint aroma of polished wood and fine fabrics, the sound of soft laughter and muted conversation weaving into a rhythm that grounded her in the present while allowing her to feel the weight of her journey. Emily recalled the long hours spent building her consultancy from the ground up, the meticulous attention to client relationships, the strategic decisions that had slowly elevated her profile in the city, each choice an exercise in discipline and foresight, and she felt the quiet satisfaction of those achievements radiating through her posture and demeanor. She allowed her gaze to briefly sweep the crowd, noting familiar faces whose recognition of her presence had shifted from polite curiosity to subtle respect, and she felt a ripple of anticipation, a sense that the culmination of her efforts was finally manifesting in the acknowledgement of the world around her. The ambient sounds of footsteps on the marble, the soft rustle of fabric, and the faint hum of the climate control system harmonized with the steady rhythm of her own breathing, reinforcing the grounded confidence she now embodied. Emily's thoughts drifted to Adam Sullivan, his calm presence a reminder of the power of support without overshadowing, of encouragement paired with respect, and she felt gratitude tempered with pride, knowing the strength she now displayed was entirely her own creation, cultivated with patience, perseverance, and clarity of purpose. As she continued deeper into the hall, the polished surfaces reflected glimpses of her image, each reflection a visual affirmation of the woman she had become, composed, capable, and quietly commanding. The subtle interplay of light and shadow accentuated her features, the careful tailoring of her outfit a symbol of deliberate control, and each movement was a silent statement of the resilience and determination that had carried her to this moment. With every step, Emily Harper embraced the convergence of past and present, the lessons learned and the power reclaimed. Moving with measured grace through the environment, she now navigated with unshakable confidence, fully aware that every eye, every fleeting expression, and every whispered acknowledgement was a testament to the journey she had undertaken, and that the quiet authority she projected would leave a lasting impression long after she had passed through the space. Emily Harper paused at the edge of the grand staircase, the filtered winter light cascading through the towering windows and illuminating the subtle shimmer of her emerald coat, and she felt a wave of quiet triumph settle over her, a deep resonance of accomplishment that spoke of the countless hours spent rebuilding her life. The soft murmur of the gathering crowd blended with the distant hum of city traffic outside, creating a steady backdrop against which she could measure the precision of her steps and the calm confidence she projected. Each footfall on the polished marble echoed softly, a rhythmic testament to the deliberate control she now commanded over her surroundings, and she allowed her gaze to sweep across the room, noting the understated elegance of the space, the delicate floral arrangements, and the warm glint of sunlight on the polished surfaces. Her thoughts drifted to the strategic choices she had made over the past months, the careful cultivation of professional relationships, and the steady accumulation of respect that had quietly elevated her to a position of influence she had once thought unattainable. Emily's eyes flickered to the familiar faces scattered throughout the hall, some offering polite nods, others exchanging subtle glances of recognition, and she felt a gentle satisfaction in knowing that her presence alone now commanded attention, respect, and curiosity, a reflection of her hard-earned growth. She ran her fingers lightly over the smooth edge of the railing as she descended, each tactile sensation grounding her in the present while reminding her of the journey from uncertainty to authority. The ambient sense of polished wood, faint florals, and subtle notes of coffee from nearby kiosks merged into a sensory landscape that both soothed and energized her, reinforcing the quiet power she carried with each step. Emily's mind wandered briefly to Adam Sullivan, the unwavering support whose calm confidence had complemented her own determination, and she felt a surge of gratitude intertwined with pride, knowing that the person she had become was a product of her own perseverance, insight, and meticulous planning. As she reached the bottom of the staircase, the light catching the glimmer of her tailored accessories and the subtle elegance of her ensemble, she paused for a moment to absorb the full impact of her presence, the way the space seemed to acknowledge her arrival without a word being spoken. Every movement, every glance, every deliberate adjustment of posture was a silent communication of authority, composure, and refined self-possession, a demonstration of the quiet yet undeniable force she now wielded. The soft background hum of conversation, the occasional clink of glassware, and the distant echo of footsteps on marble reinforced the rhythm of her navigation through the environment, each sound harmonizing with her internal sense of poise and readiness. Emily Harper moved through the hall with measured grace, fully aware of the convergence of her past efforts and present capabilities, each interaction and observation a subtle but firm assertion of her reclaimed power, a declaration that she now existed on her own terms, commanding respect, confidence, and admiration with every deliberate step she took. Emily Harper stepped into the center of the grand hall, the soft hum of conversation and the occasional clink of glass blending into a steady rhythm that underscored her composed presence. The light from the tall arched windows illuminated the polished marble floors, casting delicate reflections across her tailored emerald coat, and every movement she made seemed purposeful, measured, and entirely under her control. She navigated through the gathering with subtle authority, each nod and smile calibrated to convey warmth without revealing the depth of her triumph, and she felt the quiet satisfaction of occupying a space that had once felt unattainable. Her thoughts traced back to the early mornings spent drafting proposals, refining designs, and negotiating client relationships, moments when the weight of doubt threatened to overpower her, yet she had persevered, cultivating a blend of poise and strategy that now defined her presence. Emily observed the crowd, noting the subtle shifts in attention as individuals recognized her quiet confidence, the faint exchange of glances signaling acknowledgement of her competence and the reputation she had earned through diligence and creativity. The ambient sense of polished wood, soft florals, and the faint aroma of coffee and pastries blended to create a sensory landscape that grounded her as she moved, reinforcing the calm certainty that had been honed over years of deliberate effort. Her gaze lifted to the far end of the hall, where a large window framed the city skyline, and she allowed herself a moment to appreciate the juxtaposition of her journey against the vibrant energy of the city outside, each element a reminder of the life she had meticulously rebuilt. The hum of the crowd, the gentle laughter, and the subtle shuffle of footsteps created a backdrop of controlled motion, mirroring the steady rhythm of her own thoughts as she considered the challenges overcome, the independence secured, and the quiet power she now embodied. She ran her fingers lightly along the smooth edge of a polished railing as she descended a slight step, the tactile sensation reinforcing the reality of her accomplishments while grounding her firmly in the present. Emily's mind briefly lingered on Adam Sullivan, whose calm support had offered her the confidence to reclaim authority over her life without diminishing her own agency, and she felt a surge of gratitude for the partnership that had complemented her own strength. Each movement, each deliberate gesture, carried the weight of her reclaimed autonomy, a silent assertion of presence that was impossible to ignore, and she recognized the subtle acknowledgement in the eyes and posture of those around her, an unspoken recognition of the woman who had transformed uncertainty into decisive mastery. The filtered sunlight continued to play across the polished surfaces, highlighting the refined lines of her outfit and the composed determination in her expression, and with each step she took, Emily Harper embodied the convergence of strategy, resilience, and quiet triumph, moving through the grand hall as a figure defined not by past doubts or external validation, but by the measured confidence and authority she had painstakingly cultivated over the years. Emily Harper moved deeper into the heart of the grand hall, her emerald coat catching the soft morning light and reflecting a subtle shimmer across the polished marble floors, a visual echo of the quiet authority she now carried. The ambient hum of conversation blended with the occasional clink of glassware, creating a steady backdrop against which her presence was felt more than heard, each movement deliberate, measured, and composed. She allowed her gaze to sweep across the gathering, noting the familiar faces of former acquaintances, colleagues, and clients, each one registering a subtle shift in recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of the transformation that had taken place over the years. The careful choreography of her interactions, from polite nods to measured smiles, conveyed confidence without arrogance, a silent testament to the resilience, strategy, and insight that had brought her to this point. Emily's mind traced back through the months of meticulous planning and disciplined effort. The early mornings spent reviewing contracts, the late nights refining proposals, and the countless decisions that had steadily built her consultancy into a respected enterprise, each one a deliberate step toward independence and self-possession. The filtered sunlight streaming through the tall windows highlighted the textures and patterns of the interior, the warm tones of polished wood and soft floral arrangements contrasting with the cool elegance of the marble and glass, and she moved through the space as though fully aware of her own narrative, a story of endurance and quiet triumph unfolding with every measured gesture. The subtle scent of fresh flowers mixed with the aroma of nearby coffee and pastries, grounding her senses and enhancing her awareness of the environment, while the gentle echo of footsteps and murmured conversation provided a rhythmic cadence that matched the steady pulse of her own heartbeat. Emily's thoughts briefly touched on Adam Sullivan, whose steady support had complemented her independence, providing encouragement without overshadowing, and she felt a surge of gratitude paired with pride, a recognition that her achievements were as much the result of her own determination as the partnerships she had cultivated. Every reflection in the polished surfaces, every subtle acknowledgement from those around her, reinforced the image of a woman who had transformed challenge into mastery, uncertainty into confident authority, and hesitation into precise, deliberate action. As she moved through the hall, each step was a silent assertion of presence, each glance a careful exercise in measured influence, and she felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her journey, her effort, and her patience had positioned her not only as a participant in this world, but as a figure whose presence commanded respect, attention, and acknowledgement. Emily Harper navigated the space with calm assurance, fully aware that the culmination of her experiences, the rigor of her discipline, and the steady cultivation of her poise had rendered her both unassailable and quietly magnetic, a woman who existed on her own terms, whose authority and composure were visible in every subtle motion, reflection, and interaction she engaged in throughout the luminous, bustling hall. Emily Harper reached the center of the ballroom, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, the sound steady and deliberate, marking her presence as she surveyed the gathering with a composed and commanding gaze. Sunlight streamed through the towering windows, reflecting off the polished surfaces and casting gentle patterns across the room, highlighting the emerald sheen of her tailored coat and the subtle elegance of her ensemble. Each movement she made carried the weight of quiet authority, a result of months of careful planning, resilience, and disciplined effort that had transformed her presence into one that demanded recognition without the need for words. She observed the guests, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the momentary glances that lingered a fraction longer than expected, and the barely perceptible acknowledgement that came from those who understood, even unconsciously, the journey she had undertaken. Her mind traced the path from late nights working in a small office, perfecting proposals and cultivating relationships with clients, to the strategic decisions that had gradually elevated her professional standing and restored her confidence, each step a deliberate reclaiming of autonomy and power that was now visibly embodied in her poise. The ambient hum of conversations, the faint clinking of glasses, and the soft rustle of fabric from elegantly dressed attendees provided a rhythmic backdrop to the careful control she exerted over her movements and demeanor. Emily's thoughts briefly rested on Adam Sullivan, whose steady and respectful support had offered her a foundation to rebuild without compromise, and she allowed a subtle smile to cross her features, acknowledging privately the significance of guidance that empowered rather than overshadowed. Each reflection in the polished surfaces of the hall reminded her of the person she had become, composed, strategic, and confident, a woman whose presence was both magnetic and quietly authoritative. The gentle interplay of light and shadow accentuated the deliberate elegance of her posture and gestures, reinforcing the subtle yet undeniable statement of her achievements, resilience, and the careful orchestration of her public image. As she moved through the crowd, exchanging measured nods and acknowledging familiar faces with controlled warmth, she felt the culmination of her efforts settle into a tangible sense of satisfaction, the quiet assertion of her place in a world that once sought to diminish her. Every deliberate step, every nuanced gesture, and each carefully placed glance reinforced her mastery over the space, the people, and the perception she wished to convey. Emily Harper navigated the grand ballroom with measured grace and unwavering composure, a living testament to years of perseverance, strategic planning, and the reclaiming of her personal and professional authority, a presence that commanded attention, respect, and acknowledgement in a way that was subtle, undeniable, and entirely her own. Emily Harper felt the subtle shift in the atmosphere as she approached the center of the gathering, the murmurs and glances of the attendees seemingly bending toward her presence, each recognition and pause a silent testament to the transformation she had achieved. The light from the expansive windows framed her figure, casting long reflections across the marble floor, the emerald hue of her coat catching the sun in flashes that drew the eye without demand, a statement of quiet authority and elegance. She moved with a calm deliberation, each step measured, heels clicking softly, a rhythmic punctuation to the composed narrative she embodied. Every gesture, a careful balance of grace and intent, carried the weight of her personal and professional victories, the cumulative result of months spent reclaiming autonomy, building her consultancy, and cultivating the steady, unwavering confidence that now defined her presence. Her gaze swept across the hall, noting the subtle, involuntary acknowledgement in the posture and expressions of those around her, the way conversations seemed to momentarily pause, glances flickering toward her as if drawn by an unspoken gravity. Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the countless hours in her office, the meticulous attention to client relationships, the strategic meetings and proposals that had elevated her profile, each experience layering strength upon strength until the woman she now projected was unmistakable in her authority and composure. The soft hum of the crowd, the faint clinking of glassware, and the gentle rustle of gowns and suits combined into a harmonic backdrop that accentuated her control over the space, reinforcing the quiet dominance of her presence without need for overt assertion. She allowed her thoughts to drift briefly to Adam Sullivan, whose calm, steady support had provided a foundation for her growth, enabling her to move forward without dependence or compromise, a partnership that respected and amplified her own capabilities. Each reflection in the polished surfaces of the hall reinforced the deliberate construction of her image, poised, confident, and strategically composed, every nuance of posture, glance, and smile contributing to the narrative of accomplishment she now lived. Emily Harper's awareness of the room, her control over her movements and interactions, and the subtle interplay of light and shadow across her figure combined to form a tableau of measured power, a visual and emotional declaration that she had navigated the trials of her past and emerged with authority, grace, and the quiet assurance that her presence alone commanded respect and acknowledgement, an unspoken testament to resilience, intelligence, and the deliberate choices that had led her to this moment in the luminous, bustling space. Emily Harper stood in the center of the grand hall, the filtered sunlight streaming through the tall windows casting warm patterns across the marble floors, her emerald coat gleaming subtly with every movement, and she allowed herself a quiet, satisfied breath as the culmination of her careful, deliberate efforts came into full view. Around her, the guests moved with soft murmurs and polite glances, yet an imperceptible shift in the atmosphere marked the recognition of her presence, each subtle acknowledgement a testament to the transformation she had achieved through years of resilience, discipline, and strategic growth. Every gesture, from the poised tilt of her head to the measured grace of her steps, conveyed authority without the need for words, a quiet command of attention that spoke louder than any declaration could. Emily's mind traced the path that had brought her here, from long nights working in a modest office, meticulously reviewing contracts and proposals, to the countless decisions that had steadily built her consultancy into a respected, influential enterprise, each small victory reinforcing her confidence and self-reliance. She noted the expressions of those around her, fleeting glances that lingered just long enough to hint at acknowledgement, respect, and curiosity, and she allowed a subtle, private smile to cross her face, knowing the depth of her accomplishment was visible even to the casual observer. The ambient sense of polished wood, faint florals, and the subtle aroma of coffee and pastries mingled in the air, grounding her senses as she moved through the crowd, each sensory detail reinforcing her composed state of mind. Emily reflected on the steady presence of Adam Sullivan, whose encouragement had complemented her independence rather than diminishing it, allowing her to cultivate strength, confidence, and decisiveness entirely of her own making. Each reflection in the polished surfaces of the hall echoed her intentional posture, her controlled expressions, and the careful articulation of her presence, a living tableau of perseverance, mastery, and quiet triumph. She moved with deliberate assurance, her gaze sweeping the room, noting every nuanced response, every subtle shift in posture, the way conversations momentarily paused, and the quiet recognition that her presence elicited, a silent acknowledgement of the woman she had become. The interplay of light and shadow, the faint murmurs, the soft click of her heels on the marble, and the reflective surfaces that mirrored her figure combined to create a sensory landscape in which Emily's authority and poise were amplified and accentuated, each step and glance reinforcing the narrative of resilience and accomplishment she had crafted. Every movement was precise, measured, and deliberate, a declaration of independence and control, and she felt the quiet satisfaction of navigating the room with the assurance that her presence alone communicated her journey, her strength, and the inescapable reality that she now existed entirely on her own terms, commanding respect, attention, and acknowledgement with a quiet, unassailable authority. Emily Harper lingered at the edge of the ballroom, the filtered sunlight casting a soft golden glow across the marble floors and the towering windows framing the city beyond, and she felt the culmination of her journey settle into a quiet, unshakable satisfaction. Each subtle movement, from the deliberate tilt of her head to the precise placement of her hands, conveyed the mastery she had cultivated over years of careful planning, resilience, and strategic effort. The murmurs of the gathering formed a gentle hum, punctuated by the faint clinking of glasses and soft footsteps, a symphony of life that she navigated with calm assurance, every interaction a testament to her poise, and authority. Emily's gaze swept across the hall, noting the way familiar faces shifted imperceptibly, the subtle recognition of someone who had transformed vulnerability into undeniable strength, and she allowed herself a private smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the distance she had traveled from the doubts and limitations of the past. The polished surfaces reflected her image repeatedly, each reflection reinforcing the narrative of triumph she carried within, the emerald sheen of her coat catching the light in a way that emphasized both elegance and self-possession. Her thoughts returned briefly to Adam Sullivan, whose steady support had complemented rather than overshadowed her independence, and she felt a surge of gratitude tempered by pride, knowing that her achievements were wholly her own, earned through patience, intelligence, and unwavering determination. Emily moved slowly through the crowd, each step measured, heels clicking softly against the marble, the rhythm a quiet assertion of the authority she now embodied. And she noticed the fleeting glances of acknowledgement, the subtle shifts in posture and expression that spoke of respect, admiration, and a recognition of her journey, without a single word being spoken. The ambient light, the faint sense of polished wood and florals, and the soft murmur of conversation created a sensory backdrop that enhanced her awareness, grounding her in the moment while allowing her to feel the full measure of her accomplishment. Each gesture, each glance, and every nuanced interaction became a silent statement of self-possession, composure, and deliberate mastery over the environment she now commanded. Emily Harper's presence radiated quiet power, a careful balance of elegance and authority, and as she paused near the center of the hall, she allowed herself a final, reflective moment, the city skyline visible through the towering windows serving as a reminder of the vast horizon she had claimed for herself. Every element, the filtered sunlight, the polished marble, the attentive glances of those around her, and the poised calm of her own movements, converged into a tableau of triumph, a living testament to resilience, strategy, and the reclamation of a life on her own terms. In that luminous, bustling space, Emily Harper embodied the convergence of past effort and present mastery, moving with deliberate grace and quiet assurance, fully aware that she had reached a place of authority, respect, and unassailable self-possession that would resonate in every corner of the room long after she had passed.